My stepmother convinced my father to cut me from his will. Your daughter is unstable and would waste everything you've built, she insisted. I was homeless for 3 months before fighting my way up. At my father's funeral, the lawyer revealed a second will. My stepmother's smile vanished as security footage from his hospital room played. I don't understand what you're saying. There must be some mistake. The lawyer's voice echoed through the funeral home as he pulled out a second will, dated just 1 day before my father's death. Victoria's triumphant smile vanished instantly. The security footage from my father's hospital room appeared on the TV screen, and 5 years of carefully orchestrated vengeance finally came full circle. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all began. The day I lost everything. It started with a single misplaced file folder. I wasn't supposed to be in my father's home office that afternoon. Robert Matthews, CEO of Matthews Enterprises, kept his work life separate from home, a rule that had only strengthened since he married Victoria 3 years ago. But Dad had asked me to pick up some documents he'd forgotten, giving me his private office key with specific instructions to grab the blue folder labeled Rockwell Proposal, and nothing else. That's when I saw it, a red folder marked Cayman Transfer, peeking out from beneath his blotter. The flap had come open, revealing transfer forms with Victoria's elegant signature beside unfamiliar company names. Numbers with too many zeros. Dates that aligned perfectly with unexplained dips in company projections I'd seen in quarterly reports. My hands trembled as I took photos with my phone. The amounts totaled over $3.2 million transferred to offshore accounts. My stepmother, the woman who'd swept into our lives after Mom died, was systematically draining my father's company. What exactly do you think you're doing, Allison? I nearly dropped my phone. Victoria stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her designer blouse, her normally perfect smile replaced with something cold and calculating. These transfers, I said, holding up the folder. You're embezzling from Dad's company. She laughed, a tinkling sound that had always seemed charming until that moment. You really are your mother's daughter, aren't you? Always imagining conspiracies where there are none. These aren't imaginary, I insisted, pointing to the documents. Who's Bluewater Holdings? Why are company funds going to an account in your maiden name? Victoria's mask slipped momentarily, a flash of something dangerous in her eyes before she composed herself. Those are legitimate investments your father approved. The fact that you're sneaking around taking photos says more about your state of mind than my business dealings. Dad needs to see these. Yes, let's call him right now. She pulled out her phone, her voice shifting to something softer, vulnerable. Robert, darling, you need to come home. I'm worried about Allison. Yes, she's in your office going through confidential files. I know. She's making wild accusations. I'm scared, Robert. She reminds me of how her mother was before. The mention of my mother, who had struggled with depression before her death, was a calculated knife twist. By the time my father's car pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later, Victoria had transformed from calculating criminal to concerned stepmother, complete with worried eyes and a trembling hand pressed to her chest. Dad burst into the office, his face flushed with anger. Allison, what the hell is going on? Dad, she's stealing from the company. Look at these. I tried to hand him the folder, but Victoria gently intercepted it. Robert, I think she's having some kind of episode. Remember how Dr. Winters mentioned family history can be a factor. My father's expression changed from anger to concern. Allie, have you been taking your medication? What medication? Dad, I'm not on any medication. See what I mean? Victoria whispered just loud enough for me to hear. The denial is exactly how it started with Elizabeth. The family dinner that night was excruciating. Dad had insisted I stay, concerned about my state of mind. Victoria played her role perfectly, the caring stepmother worried about her troubled stepdaughter. Every time I tried to bring up the transfers, she would exchange glances with my father, who would change the subject. I've been thinking, Allie, he said as Victoria served coffee. Maybe you should take some time off. Focus on your health before jumping into the company. My health is fine, I insisted. Dad, you promised Mom before she died that I would have a place in Matthews Enterprises. I've worked for this. My MBA, the internships, everything was to prepare me for this. Victoria set down her cup with a delicate clink. Robert, remember what Dr. Harrison said about stress as a trigger? What doctor? Dad, I haven't seen any doctor. My father reached for Victoria's hand. Allie, we've noticed some concerning behaviors. The paranoia, the mood swings. Victoria's brother is a psychiatrist. He recommended someone who specializes in cases like yours. Cases like mine? Dad, she's manipulating you. There are no doctors. There are no concerning behaviors. She's stealing from you and turning you against me. The outburst sealed my fate. Victoria's eyes welled with perfectly timed tears. Just like Elizabeth, she whispered. The accusations, the anger. Robert, I'm frightened for her. 3 days later, a certified letter arrived from my father's attorney. I had been removed from his will, cut off from my trust fund, and my position at Matthews Enterprises had been indefinitely postponed. The letter cited concerns about my mental stability and included recommendations for several psychiatric facilities. That same afternoon I found my apartment locks changed. My calls to my father went straight to voicemail. My bank accounts had been frozen due to suspicious activity. Credit cards declined. Even my childhood home's security system no longer recognized my fingerprint. Night fell as I sat in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, scrolling through my contacts for someone, anyone, who might take me in. But Victoria had been thorough. Friends received calls about my breakdown. Extended family heard I was entering treatment. Former classmates were told I'd had a disturbing episode. I counted the cash in my wallet. $43. The first heavy drops of rain hit my windshield as I reclined the driver's seat as far as it would go and tried to get comfortable. In less than a week, I had gone from corporate heir to homeless, with nothing but my car, 2 suitcases, and an accusation no one believed. I didn't cry that night. Something inside me had hardened into resolve. Victoria had taken everything from me. My father, my inheritance, my home, my reputation. But she had made one critical mistake. She had left me alive to fight back. Morning light filtered through my car windows as I jolted awake, momentarily confused by my surroundings. Reality crashed back. This wasn't a nightmare. This was my life now. I straightened my wrinkled blouse and checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. Dark circles had formed under my eyes, but I couldn't afford to look defeated. Not when I needed to find work immediately. The first week was brutal. I rationed my $43 for essentials while sleeping in my car, parking in different spots each night to avoid attention. I showered at a 24-hour gym using a trial membership, washing my interview clothes in bathroom sinks and drying them over the back seat. Each morning, I'd put on my one professional outfit and head to cafes with free Wi-Fi to search for jobs and send applications. By week 2, my car became a liability, eating gas money I couldn't spare. I reluctantly left it in long-term airport parking, gathering what I could carry in a single suitcase. That night, I swallowed my pride and checked into a women's shelter downtown. "First time?" asked an older woman named Grace as she showed me to a narrow cot. I nodded, fighting back tears. "Keep your shoes under your pillow and your important papers on you at all times," she advised. "And honey, that designer watch. Trade it for something cheaper before someone makes that decision for you." I traded my watch, a college graduation gift from my father, for a basic timepiece, some cash, and a prepaid phone. The transaction felt like selling another piece of my former self, but sentiment wouldn't keep me fed. The shelter had a 3-week maximum stay. I used every minute strategically, volunteering in their office to maintain my administrative skills, using their address for job applications, and networking with social workers who knew of temporary opportunities. "You're overqualified for everything you're applying for," remarked the shelter's career counselor after reviewing my resume. "MBA from Wharton, internships at Goldman Sachs. Why aren't you aiming higher?" I couldn't tell her the truth, that Victoria's influence had blacklisted me from financial firms across the city. Each interview ended the same way, polite smiles followed by rejection emails citing more suitable candidates. One interviewer had even mentioned hearing about my personal struggles, a clear reference to Victoria's rumors. When my shelter time expired, I bounced between a weekly rate motel and a church basement program, taking odd jobs to survive. Office temping, inventory at retail stores, even dog walking for busy executives. Each paycheck went toward keeping up appearances, maintaining my cell service, dry cleaning my interview outfit, printing resumes on quality paper. 74 days into my new reality, I was nursing a coffee at a diner, stretching it out to justify using their Wi-Fi, when someone slid into the booth across from me. "I thought that was you," said a familiar voice. I looked up to see Janet Collins, my father's executive assistant of 15 years, until Victoria had her replaced with her own college roommate. "Janet," I whispered, instinctively glancing around. "I can't be seen with you." "If Victoria, I don't work for your father anymore, remember?" Janet's eyes softened as she took in my appearance. "And from the looks of it, neither do you." Over the next hour, I told her everything. The discovered documents, Victoria's manipulation, my current situation. Janet listened without interruption, occasionally nodding as pieces fell into place. "I always knew something was off about her," Janet said finally. "The way company funds were being reallocated, the new consultants, with no qualifications, how she isolated your father from longtime employees." "No one would believe me," I said, staring into my cold coffee. "I believe you," Janet replied, reaching for her purse. She slid a business card across the table. "I'm at Meridian Corp now. Junior VP of Operations. We have an executive assistant position opening in the finance department next week. It's entry-level, beneath your qualifications, but—" "I'll take it," I interrupted, hope flaring for the first time in months. Janet nodded. "Use my name but not your connection to your father. Victoria's been thorough about spreading stories. Come by Monday 9 a.m. sharp." The Meridian interview was rigorous despite Janet's recommendation. I used my mother's maiden name, Walker, claiming my experience was primarily on the West Coast. The salary was modest, but when they offered me the position, I nearly wept with relief. My first paycheck went toward a room in a women's transitional housing program. A step up from shelters with a private bedroom but shared kitchen and bathroom. The place had strict rules. Curfew, mandatory financial counseling, no male visitors. But it offered stability and a legitimate address. At Meridian, I kept my head down, arriving early and staying late. I befriended the IT staff by bringing coffee and homemade cookies, baked during my allocated kitchen time at the housing program. I had lunch with accounting clerks, chatted with security guards, and volunteered for tasks no one else wanted. Slowly, I built a network of allies who knew me only as Allison Walker, the hardworking assistant with a knack for numbers. No one connected me to Matthews Enterprises or my father. In their eyes, I was just another young professional starting from the bottom. 3 months into my job, I was reviewing reports from my boss when I noticed a discrepancy in the quarterly projections. A formula error had cascaded through the spreadsheet, inflating expected returns by nearly 12%. Which would translate to millions when presented to investors. Instead of simply flagging it, I rebuilt the entire model, working through the night at my tiny desk in the shared housing. I arrived early the next morning and placed both versions on my manager's desk with a detailed explanation of the error and its potential impact. By afternoon, I'd been called to a meeting with the department head and CFO. My stomach knotted as I entered the conference room, certain I'd overstepped. "Ms. Walker," the CFO began, "you identified an error that would have cost this company approximately $7.3 million in misallocated resources." I nodded, hands clasped tightly in my lap. "And then," he continued, "instead of simply reporting it, you took the initiative to reconstruct the entire projection model, which, frankly, is superior to our current system." The department head leaned forward. "We'd like to offer you a position as junior financial analyst, effective immediately. With appropriate salary adjustment, of course." As I walked out of that meeting, promotion letter in hand, I passed a conference room where a familiar face appeared on the video screen. Victoria was presenting at an industry event, standing beside my father, who looked thinner, grayer than I remembered. My throat tightened, but I kept walking. Victoria had taken everything from me once, but she'd made a critical miscalculation. She thought she'd broken me, but she'd merely forced me to rebuild myself. Stronger, smarter, and perfectly positioned for what would come next. My promotion to junior financial analyst marked the beginning of a carefully calculated ascent. I moved out of transitional housing into a modest studio apartment 6 months later, gradually rebuilding a life that bore little resemblance to my previous one. I kept a single photo of my mother tucked in my wallet, my only visible connection to the past. Meridian became my battleground and sanctuary. I poured myself into each project, arriving first and leaving last. Quarterly reviews consistently rated me in the top percentile. By my first anniversary, I'd been promoted to senior analyst. 6 months later, I became assistant director of financial operations, a position that granted access to company-wide financial data. Through it all, I maintained my cover as Allison Walker, keeping a deliberately low social media presence and declining invitations to industry events where I might be recognized. My colleagues knew me as intensely private, attributed to a fictional bad breakup that Janet had helped establish as my backstory. "You're becoming our resident forensic accounting genius," my director commented one evening as I analyzed acquisition reports. "The way you find patterns most people miss. It's almost like you've seen these structures before." I had not just seen them, memorized them. Victoria's embezzlement schemes from my father's company had etched specific patterns into my memory. Shell companies with subtle naming conventions, irregular transfer schedules, legitimate-looking consulting fees that added up to significant sums. Late one night, 18 months into my Meridian career, I was reviewing acquisition proposals when I spotted it. Blue Water Holdings. The same shell company from Victoria's Cayman transfers. My hands trembled as I pulled up additional documentation. There it was, the same signature pattern of financial movements but on a much larger scale. I began building a private database, working nights and weekends to document connections. Victoria wasn't just stealing from my father's company. She was orchestrating a complex web of financial manipulation across multiple corporations, including Meridian. The shell companies connected to offshore accounts, which fed into investment trusts, which circled back to legitimate businesses, with Victoria's fingerprints carefully removed from all but the most obscure documentation. My breakthrough came when I discovered that 3 seemingly unrelated consulting firms, all recommended to different companies by Victoria, were registered to the same address in Luxembourg. Each firm charged substantial fees for strategic restructuring that inevitably directed resources toward companies within Victoria's hidden network. With my growing reputation at Meridian, I was assigned to the team preparing for the National Financial Operations Summit. The annual industry conference would host representatives from all major corporations in our sector, including Matthews Enterprises. "We need our best people front and center," my director instructed. "Allison, you'll present the efficiency model you developed." I wanted to refuse, but doing so would raise questions. Instead, I prepared meticulously, rehearsing my presentation while developing strategies to avoid my father and Victoria. The conference center buzzed with activity as I navigated through crowded halls, keeping my head down. I'd changed my appearance, darkened my naturally blonde hair to brown, adopted thick-framed glasses, and chosen subdued clothing that my former self would never have worn. Still, I constantly scanned for familiar faces. Midway through the afternoon sessions, I ducked into a service corridor for a moment of quiet. As I turned the corner, I collided with someone. "I'm sorry, I wasn't," the words died in my throat. My father stood before me, briefcase in hand, looking startled by the collision. But what truly shocked me was his appearance. Robert Matthews, once robust and commanding, looked gaunt, his skin sallow, designer suit hanging loosely on his frame. Deep lines had etched themselves around his eyes, and his hair had gone completely gray. Recognition flickered across his face. "Ali." I froze, heart hammering against my ribs. 2 years of careful anonymity shattered in an instant. I have to go," I stammered, turning to leave. "Wait." His voice lacked its former authority, sounding almost fragile. "Please." Something in his tone stopped me. I glanced around to ensure we were alone. 5 minutes, he said. "The Wentworth Hotel bar across the street. 8 o'clock tonight." He pressed a key card into my palm. "Room 1542. Come up the service elevator. Victoria's having dinner with investors until 10. Before I could respond, he continued down the corridor, shoulders stooped in a way I'd never seen before. 8 o'clock found me entering the service elevator of the Wentworth, stomach knotted with conflicting emotions. Part of me screamed this was a trap. Another part desperately wanted to see my father again. Room 1542 was a corner suite. My father opened the door at my soft knock, ushering me in quickly. Up close, he looked even worse. Thinner, exhausted, his movements lacking their characteristic precision. "You look different," he said, studying my appearance. "But good. Healthy." "You don't," I replied bluntly. He managed a shadow of his former smile. direct as always. He gestured toward the sitting area. We don't have much time. I remained standing. Why am I here? To sign some psychological evaluation? Another document removing me from what little might be left of my inheritance. Pain flashed across his face. I deserve that. I deserve worse. He moved to the minibar, hands trembling slightly as he poured 2 fingers of scotch. I've been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 3 months, maybe 4. The news hit like a physical blow. Despite everything, this was my father. The man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had held me through my mother's funeral, who had been my hero before Victoria entered our lives. I'm sorry, I managed. I've been a fool, Ali. He took a long sip of scotch. For the past 8 months, I've been gathering evidence. Victoria's schemes, her manipulations, I see them now. My professional mask slipped. 8 months? I've been homeless, Dad. I slept in shelters in my car. I lost everything while you took 2 years to notice your wife is a criminal. I know. His voice cracked. When I finally started looking, really looking, I found the extent of what she's done. Not just to the company but to you. The rumors she spread, the doctors she claimed you'd seen. He set down his glass with a shaking hand. I hired investigators. They found you 6 months ago at Meridian. I've been following your career under your new name. You've done remarkably. My anger deflated slightly. Why not contact me sooner? I needed proof first. Evidence you weren't unstable, evidence of what Victoria's been doing. He moved to his briefcase, retrieving a thin file. She's more dangerous than you know, Ali. The financial schemes go beyond embezzlement. She's been systematically destabilizing competitor companies, including Meridian, while positioning herself to absorb the fallout. As I scanned the documents he provided, connections snapped into place. The missing pieces to the puzzle I'd been assembling. I'm dying, Allison, my father said quietly. But before I go, I'm going to make this right. My father and I developed a system to communicate safely. I purchased a prepaid phone under a false name, and we established code words and meeting locations. Though I initially resisted forgiving him, his deteriorating health and genuine remorse gradually softened my resolve. We didn't have time for extended reconciliation. Victoria's schemes were accelerating, and my father's condition was worsening by the week. She's gotten careless, my father explained during our third meeting, this time in a rarely used public library reading room. We sat in a secluded corner, documents spread between us. She thinks I'm too sick to notice the inconsistencies in company reports, the unusual transfers. She's not entirely wrong, I said, noting how his hands trembled as he passed me files. You need to conserve your strength. He shook his head stubbornly. I need to fix what I've done. To the company, to you. We established a rhythm. I'd analyze the financial data he smuggled out, comparing it with information from Meridian, building a comprehensive map of Victoria's operations. My father would document her behavior at home, noting conversations and suspicious activities. 2 weeks later, he introduced me to Marcus Haywood, his longtime head of security who had been quietly sidelined after Victoria's arrival. Marcus had maintained loyalty to my father, watching from the periphery as things deteriorated. Victoria replaced most of the household staff with her own people, Marcus explained as we met in his modest apartment. But she keeps me around for appearances, the loyal employee too close to retirement to fire without raising questions. Marcus became our most valuable asset. While Victoria focused on my father, Marcus moved invisibly through the house, installing miniature security cameras in common areas, my father's office and even the bedroom they shared. Nothing in bathrooms or private spaces, my father insisted. We're gathering evidence, not becoming voyeurs. The cameras revealed disturbing patterns. Victoria regularly searched my father's office when he was resting. She held hushed phone conversations in the garden, speaking in coded language about accelerated timelines and final transitions. Most concerning, she personally managed my father's medications, insisting the household staff allow her to administer his pills. Something's not right with the medication, my father confided 4 weeks into our investigation. The side effects are worse than my doctors predicted. I'm deteriorating faster than expected. Marcus arranged for samples of my father's medications to be analyzed by a laboratory that owed him a favor. The results confirmed our suspicions. His pain medication had been supplemented with additional substances that, while not lethal individually, created a compound effect that exacerbated his symptoms and accelerated his decline. "She's killing me slowly," my father said when I showed him the results, his voice eerily calm. "Not enough to raise suspicion, just enough to ensure I don't outlive her patience." We had to move carefully. Victoria was well-connected and increasingly paranoid, often checking my father's phone and monitoring his visitors. Meanwhile, at Meridian, I received another promotion to Deputy Director of Strategic Finance, which put tremendous demands on my time but also granted me access to crucial information about industry-wide financial movements. My days became a careful balancing act, excelling at Meridian during business hours, then working late into the night analyzing Victoria's patterns and meeting my father whenever possible. I survived on minimal sleep and maximum caffeine, driven by a sense of urgency that grew with each passing week. "She's accelerating her timeline," I told my father during a brief meeting in his doctor's waiting room while Victoria was shopping. "The shell companies are consolidating assets. 3 of the offshore accounts have been emptied and closed. She's preparing for something major." My father nodded grimly. "She's been making changes to my medical directive, bringing in different lawyers each time so no one sees the full picture. Last week she tried to get me to sign paperwork limiting who can visit me in the hospital. We developed a contingency plan." My father secretly contacted his longtime attorney, Lawrence Hoffman, a man who had been with the company since before I was born. Though Victoria had relegated him to handling minor legal matters, his loyalty to my father remained unwavering. With Lawrence's help, my father drafted a new will, one that Victoria knew nothing about. "It won't be enough just to cut her out," my father explained. "She'll contest it, claim I wasn't of sound mind. We need irrefutable evidence." Marcus enhanced the security system, focusing particularly on my father's home office and the master bedroom. We needed to capture Victoria incriminating herself, ideally discussing her plans or tampering with medication. But she was careful, almost never speaking openly even in what she believed was complete privacy. Our breakthrough came unexpectedly. Victoria's assistant called in sick, and she had to manage her own schedule for the day. Rushing between appointments, she left her private laptop open in the bedroom. My father, having one of his stronger days, managed to install a keystroke logger Marcus had provided before Victoria returned. The information we gathered was damning: emails to offshore accounts, conversations with co-conspirators, detailed timelines for what she called the transition. She had planned everything from my father's declining health to the corporate takeover that would follow his death. "She's planning to make her move the moment I'm gone," my father said, his voice hollow as we reviewed the evidence in Lawrence's office. "She's already arranged to liquidate company assets worth millions." With Lawrence's guidance, we compiled everything: financial records, security footage, medication analysis, Victoria's emails, into a comprehensive file. My father officially revised his will, with Lawrence bringing in a court-appointed witness to verify his mental competence. Everything was in place. But Victoria sensed something had changed. She increased my father's medication, limited his visitors more strictly, and began spending more time at home monitoring him. My father's condition deteriorated rapidly under the increased dosage. I was presenting quarterly projections to Meridian's board when my burner phone vibrated with a text from Marcus. "Covenant initiated. St. Luke's. Our emergency code." My father had been rushed to St. Luke's Hospital. I somehow finished my presentation before rushing out, claiming a family emergency. The drive to the hospital was a blur of traffic and panic. By the time I arrived, Victoria had already established herself at my father's bedside. Surrounded by hospital staff she'd charmed into compliance. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered, catching me in the corridor before I could be seen. "She's restricted visitors to immediate family only. She's telling everyone you're unstable and your presence would distress him." "Is he alive but fading fast? The doctor gives him hours, maybe a day." Marcus pressed something cold and metallic into my palm, a service key to the hospital's maintenance areas. "Room 418. There's a utility closet across the hall with a clear view. I've already set up a camera feed to Lawrence's office. Whatever happens now, we'll have it documented." I gripped the key, ice forming in my veins as rain battered against the hospital windows. The storm that had been gathering for years was finally breaking, and all I could do was watch and wait for the lightning to strike. The hospital corridors seemed endless as I followed Marcus' directions to the utility closet. My heart raced with each step, constantly glancing over my shoulder for any sign of Victoria or her allies. The service key trembled in my hand as I unlocked the closet door, slipping inside among mops and cleaning supplies. Marcus had indeed prepared well. A small monitor showed a feed from my father's room, where Victoria sat beside his bed, her perfectly manicured hand resting possessively on his arm. My father looked diminished against the white hospital sheets, tubes and monitors surrounding him like a technological cocoon. For 3 hours, I watched Victoria maintain her devoted wife performance for the medical staff. The moment they left, her demeanor changed instantly. Checking her watch impatiently, scrolling through her phone, barely acknowledging my father except to adjust his medication drip. When night fell and the hospital quieted for evening rounds, Marcus texted again. Nurses station distracted. Service elevator clear. Now. In the maintenance area, he waited with a hospital orderly's uniform and ID badge. You have 10 minutes while Victoria's getting coffee. The night nurse thinks you're from respiratory therapy coming to check his oxygen levels. I changed quickly, tucking my hair under the cap and keeping my face down as I pushed a cart of supplies toward room 418. My hands shook as I swiped the badge, the door opening with a soft click. Dad lay with his eyes closed, his breathing shallow and labored. Dad, I whispered, touching his hand gently. It's me. His eyelids fluttered open, recognition dawning slowly. Ali, you came. His voice was a raspy whisper. I don't have much time, I said, checking the monitoring equipment as though performing routine tasks. Victoria's controlling everything. Listen carefully. Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort. Lawrence has everything. But there's more. He gestured weakly toward the small cabinet beside his bed. Blue tile. Bathroom, behind. I moved to the adjoining bathroom, fingers probing the blue tiles until one shifted slightly. Behind it was a small cavity containing a key wrapped in a handwritten note with an address and box number. Safe deposit, my father whispered when I returned to his bedside. Insurance policy. She doesn't know. The sound of voices in the hallway sent panic through me. Dad, I have to go. His fingers tightened around mine with surprising strength. I'm so sorry, Ali. For everything. I know, Dad. The door began to open. I ducked behind the privacy curtain, heart pounding in my chest. Robert, darling, they were out of the good coffee. Victoria's voice dripped with false sweetness. Oh, you're awake. Perfect timing. From my hiding place, I watched through a gap in the curtain as Victoria settled into the chair beside my father, pulling papers from her designer handbag. The lawyers found some inconsistencies in your medical power of attorney, she explained, uncapping a pen. Just a quick signature to clean things up. You know how these legal details can be. My father's eyes flicked momentarily toward the hidden camera in the room's smoke detector. What? Inconsistencies? Victoria's smile remained fixed, but her voice hardened slightly. Just some outdated language about permitted treatments and who can make decisions. The doctors recommend we update it immediately, given your condition. She positioned the papers and placed the pen in his trembling hand. With effort, my father raised his head slightly, eyes squinting at the document. This isn't power of attorney. This is will amendment. Victoria's smile faltered briefly. It's a comprehensive update, Robert. Your medications must be confusing you. The doctor said your condition is affecting your comprehension. Just sign, darling. I want Lawrence to review first. Her practiced composure cracked slightly. Lawrence is on vacation. We've discussed this, Robert. Besides, he's not equipped to handle matters of this complexity anymore. Then I won't sign. My father let the pen drop from his fingers. For a split second, fury flashed across Victoria's face before she controlled it. Robert, be reasonable. Your condition is deteriorating. We need to. A nurse entered to check vitals, forcing Victoria to resume her devoted wife performance. I used the distraction to slip out, the safe deposit key burning in my pocket like a talisman. The next morning I met Lawrence at the bank. The safe deposit box contained everything we needed. Original documents tracing Victoria's embezzlement back 5 years, records of conversations with her co-conspirators, and a recorded confession from one of Victoria's earliest partners who'd been cut out of the scheme. Your father was more thorough than any of us realized, Lawrence said as we catalogued the evidence. He's been collecting this for over a year, long before he reached out to you. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. He's gone. 5:36 a.m. She's already making calls. The world seemed to stop. Despite our complicated history and the pain between us, losing my father felt like losing a part of myself. I allowed myself exactly 3 minutes of grief before refocusing on what needed to be done. We need to move quickly, I told Lawrence. Victoria will try to take control of everything immediately. The funeral was held 3 days later, an elaborate affair that spoke more to Victoria's desire for public sympathy than any genuine mourning. I attended quietly, wearing a simple black dress and veil, standing at the back of the church. Several old family friends recognized me, their whispers spreading through the gathering. That's the daughter. The troubled one. Heard she had a breakdown, institutionalized. Should she even be here? After what she put Robert through. Victoria played her role perfectly, the grieving widow supported by sympathetic friends, occasionally dabbing at dry eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. She acknowledged my presence with the barest nod, her eyes communicating a clear message. You don't belong here. The real performance came 3 days later at the reading of the will in Lawrence's office. Victoria arrived with her personal attorney, dressed immaculately in designer mourning clothes, an air of scarcely contained triumph surrounding her. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw me sitting quietly in the corner, but she recovered quickly. Allison. How unexpected. I wasn't aware you'd be joining us for these private family matters. Mr. Hoffman invited me, I replied simply. Did he? Her smile was glacial. How interesting considering the terms of Robert's will. Lawrence entered carrying 2 folders and a laptop. He greeted everyone solemnly before taking his seat at the head of the conference table. Before we begin, he said, I'm required to inform everyone that this proceeding is being recorded for legal purposes. Victoria nodded impatiently. Of course. Shall we proceed? I have arrangements waiting that require my attention. Certainly. Lawrence opened the first folder. This is the last will and testament of Robert James Matthews, dated January 12th of last year, which leaves the entirety of his estate to his wife, Victoria Elaine Matthews, with the exception of a small charitable donation. Victoria's smile grew, her eyes flicking toward me with barely concealed satisfaction. However, Lawrence continued, producing the second folder, I also have in my possession a subsequent will, properly executed and witnessed, dated just 1 day before Mr. Matthews' death. The color drained from Victoria's face. That's impossible. Robert was barely conscious his final days. He couldn't possibly. I have video confirmation of his mental competency at the time of signing, Lawrence interrupted, turning his laptop to face the room. Along with this rather illuminating footage from Mr. Matthews' hospital room. I don't understand what you're saying. There must be some mistake. The lawyer's voice echoed through the funeral home as he pulled out a second will, dated just 1 day before my father's death. Victoria's triumphant smile vanished instantly. The security footage from my father's hospital room appeared on the screen, and 5 years of carefully orchestrated vengeance finally came full circle. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived.